Okay, so the main idea is that because life is interconnected, we should revere and preserve the lives of others because it affects us. Problems immediately arise. Death is guaranteed. Life kills to live. Helping others to help oneself is selfish. Given these problems, why should we revere life or attend to the interconnected web of it? And so off we go. In your life, you have a grand total of roughly 1.5 billion heartbeats. So does a cow. This is the observation of physicist Geoffrey West, who has found that this number is roughly consistent within all life, animals and plants. He explains that the elephant hearts beat slowly, hummingbird hearts beat fast, but when your count is up, you are over. Plants pulse as well, moving nourishment through their veins. They obey the same commands of scale. And when the formula says you're done, amazingly, the buttercup and the redwood tree obey. Why would life do that? As far as we know, our planet is the only one that has produced life. So why, when life is so rare, did it evolve with expiration dates? Why is death necessary? I mean, we're all going to die. Everything is going to die. And so what's the point? The question requires some big picture perspective. It's a big picture question. And it requires a little imagination as well. So from a wide lens, I mean a very wide lens, we can see categories, orders, and levels of being and forces. We can see that the force of change is a higher order than the force of life. The force of change trumps life. Perhaps then the mathematics of death is actually an adaptive survival technique. Perhaps the truth is that individuals, from cells to gray whales, die individually in order to prevent life itself from being annihilated under the law of change. So this is cosmic judo, where on the scale of life and existence itself, innumerable small changes, dying, absorb and diffuse the force of change from a cosmic cataclysmic scale to an individual and recyclable scale. So life dies in bits in order to avoid dying once and for all. Life emerged, has figured out how to persist. It persists through dividing itself. It persists by dying in small doses. I don't know if that's true. I only started thinking about it this week. But it makes sense to me, and it's compelling, I think. And there is some poetry in it, and it is noble. The one sacrificing itself for the perpetuation of the whole. And who knows, it may be true. But it is only noble and true if its central assumption is also true. And the assumption it makes is that life is a whole, unified force, and that is a whopper. For we know that life emerged from very small, highly complex material relationships. A chemical reaction that then self-replicated and evolved. So about 4 billion years ago, so even before Leon was born, life was produced by lifeless matter. And now life abounds in innumerable incarnations. Right, so the problem is, if life is both dependent on matter and also embodied in infinite diversity, how can life be a distinct, unified force? So consider this. Not all chemical reactions demonstrate the kind of perpetuation that the ones that produce life do. The drive to perpetuate is unique and often expansive. So it is another order of being in existence. It is another force. As such, life may be a force emergent from, but other than, chemical, thereby becoming as much of a source for as a product of biology. In this way, life can be understood as a unified whole, a distinct force. Finally, with a wide enough lens, the interconnectivity of life creates a unified whole. So if the assumption that life can be life itself, that life can be a whole and distinct force, if that is to be believed, then we are not only interconnected, you and I. We are not only connected, you and I, and the plants. We are not only connected, we are of the same source. And not just the same source, but the same force, which is in addition to, which is to say in relationship with or dependent upon, but at any rate other than and beyond material forces. This is the spirit of life. Divided to survive, infusing matter with itself and inhabiting, shaping, pushing that matter into persistently procreative beings that can and must digest the matter of each other. The same force, the same mathematics that motivate the plant, motivate me. The same drive. Stay alive, stay alive. Oh, single cell, oh, great blue whale, stay alive, stay alive. Stay alive until the time to die inscribed on the bones of your bones folds you in and disperses you in piece to pieces, taking new shapes. Have you ever seen a cow get a steel bolt jammed through its brain case? It's a lot more jarring than the shift that I just made. Anyway, if you haven't seen a cow get a steel bolt jammed through its brain case, you should. It's one of the preferred methods of killing cows in factory farms. Now, there's no getting around killing. We kill when we breathe. And not just because some of us should brush more often. We kill en masse on accident every day, all the time. And so does everything alive. That understanding compels us to ask the question of why. which we've addressed to some extent already, and which led me anyway, to consider that there is such a thing as life itself, and that it manifests in manner to create living beings, from cell to plant to person to whale, and that we therefore are manifestations of the same shared force, that I and the plant are possessed by the same shared force, and in some sense, in the most fundamental sense, are the same force. I speculated that this force which I am, which we are, persists because it divided itself in order to die in small doses, induced change on a continuous but scaled basis so as not to be so soon annihilated itself entirely by the greater force of change. So we kill a lot. But what I hope to have done in the first part of the sermon is to give you a sense, or at least an invitation into thinking about the sacredness of life itself, and how we are beings of that, and how each delineation of life, each being, gives up the life it holds in order to perpetuate life itself, and how that sacrifice is beautiful. Now, even though no being wants to be killed, killing is a part of that beauty. So I hope to have offered a reverence for life and death. I hope to have offered you a non-anthropomorphic way of identifying with any manifestation of life. That is, I hope to have made it possible for you to see the same thing in a caterpillar or a cactus as you feel in yourself, without seeing yourself in the caterpillar. I do not wish for you to see yourself in nature, but rather in nature, which includes the person next to you, to find a way of seeing beyond yourself. A way of looking into the eye of life itself and finding identity expanding there. If you accept this invitation, death and even killing are no longer the enemy nor final in a fundamental sense. They remain tragic. For life felt by the one living, it is the most precious event in time. But death can be heroic. Killing must be accepted. But not all killing. Intentionally ending a life ought to be done with great care. We may live in an interconnected web as big as existence, but in my imagination, your local network has the most impact on you and you on it within that existential web. So our local network, on the biological scale, would be humans, and then simians, and then mammals, and then, I don't know, I suppose animals with vertebrae, and so on and so on. And because those beings are in our local network, and because each is a window into the force of life itself, and because life felt by the one living it is the most precious event in time, because all these things are decisions about how we treat those beings, has tremendous importance. It is important how we treat each other. And it is important how we treat animals and the systems upon which they depend. When a cow gets a bolt through the brain case, it is first corralled by electric shocks into a small pen where its companion has likely moments ago been killed. Up to this moment, the cow has led a life that has been so devoid of its own natural state that were we in her place, many of us would welcome death. Indeed, many of this cow's companions have lost the will to live. In fact, researchers employed by the factory farms themselves have found that some ill-treated animals manifest symptoms of immunological failures resulting in social defeat. Folks, I'm on pretty safe ground when I say that all animals in factory farms are ill-treated. Yet in spite of what may seem a welcome end to suffering, the moment of the cow's execution is a panicked moment. Does the cow know what is happening exactly? The cow is terrified. Its eyes are rolling, its heart is racing, its body is thrashing, fighting. She is bellowing. This bolt is sometimes machine operated, sometimes it is handheld, in which case an arm reaches over the side of the pen and tries to aim correctly. She's thrashing. It takes a couple of tries. The bolt embeds in other parts. Finally, the screaming of the cow ceases as the bolt enters her brain case. Yet, too many remain conscious as machines hoist them up by one leg to have their throats cut. And then saws and cleavers do not always wait for the bleed out before they begin to take her apart. Her natural lifespan is 20 years, but this is likely her fourth. If you eat factory farmed meat, that is what you eat. If you are eating factory farm meat, you are complicit in that system. It then may be relevant to know that a study conducted by Northeastern University and the Massachusetts SPCA found that people who abuse animals are 5 times as likely to commit violent crimes against humans. Is it any wonder that our culture is rife with fear and violence when we get our sustenance by turning the most precious event in time, that is a life felt by the one living it, into a nightmare where our appetite is the monster and our heart the destination? Kill what you will, but understand the impact of that kill. Understand the life of the life you take as far as you can. Do this particularly when you kill those in your local network of interconnectivity. The morality of eating beings that had a heartbeat is yours to discern. However, the morality of breeding, raising, and then killing beings in fear and cruelty is not in question. It's immoral. It pollutes life. So we have proceeded from an argument promoting the idea that there is an emergent, animating, energizing force of life itself. Such an understanding is an invitation into an expanding identity, what some may call a spiritual experience, wherein the sense of the underlying unity of life lingers, if diminished, upon our return to the more myopic and mundane day-to-day identities we carry. But this lingering sense orients us to a reverence for life and a reverence for dying. The experience of the unity of life remains with us as a reverence for life. Meanwhile, a reverence for life in turn opens the door to experience the identity expanding unity of the life force. Reverence compels us to reflect on and adjust how we treat each other, how we treat other beings, and particularly those whose forms are similar to ours, like cows. and like friends. I'll leave you with a story of one of those, a friend. So this was during my first few months at seminary, and I didn't have many friends at the school. As a Unitarian Universalist at a Presbyterian seminary, I was a stranger in a strange land. One of my Presbyterian classmates suggested that I go out for beers with her husband. They were new to town, and so he was also looking to make friends within that community. Now this guy was a musician, a rock and roller, with a kind of nerdy twist. So, you know, synthesizers, I don't know. Anyway, we got on beautifully. More so with every pint. And by the time I'd lost count, the subject of religion was flung wide open. More beautiful conversation ensued. All of which I have, of course, forgotten. Except one phrase. One phrase I will remember forever. As we were settling our tab, my new friend summed up his whole theology. I was putting on my coat, which means it must have been late October or November. And he said, I don't know, man. For me, it all comes down to mercy and grace. Mercy and grace. Freaking awesome. And so it is that we start with self-destruction, the mathematics of death, and end with mercy. Indeed, it is because life vies with itself that we must end, and that we must proceed with mercy. It is in mercy where grace is given ground to grow in your consciousness. It is in mercy where we come to the startling conclusion of our connection beyond our intention, to the grace that binds us to other beings, to each other, and is life itself. Grace. And so it is in mercy and grace where our solitude fades, our identity expands to touch and be the timeless, immortal life of life.